So today I want to give you 5 diet heuristics you can use to help make better decisions in your daily eating. Now, a heuristic is just a mental shortcut that you can take. Instead of having to think through a process every time and think about all the steps and the outcomes, you can use a heuristic or a shortcut and still arrive most of the time at that same result that you wanted. So the first one is consume your protein first. Every time you sit down to eat a main meal, consume your protein first. Now, when I sit down with people and I help them structure their eating, their calories, their macros, the first thing I always do is identify how much protein they should be consuming in their meals or in a day. Once you identify how much you should be having each day, you divide it across the number of meals that you typically have, and now you know how much protein you should be having at each meal. So if you know you should be having 30 grams of protein at a meal, right, you want to consume that first before you start getting full on rice, potatoes, and other things like that. If you do that, you're likely to satiate any kind of hunger pains you went into the meal with, less likely to overeat on all the bad things and empty calories. Now, on that note, this is a point that Dr. Eric Serrano pointed out, is famous for having said many times. Nature doesn't create a source of protein without a fat attached to it. So thinking about it, researching it, he makes a very good point. You'd be very hard pressed to find a source in nature of protein that doesn't also have a fat connected to it. Now, unless man steps in and removes the part of the animal or the plant or whatever and just takes the protein out, right, and leaves the fat behind, that's when man gets involved. But as far as nature's concerned, it doesn't create a protein without a fat attached to it. Now, the way this works as a heuristic is if you're consuming your protein from natural sources, you likely don't need to be very strict on counting the fat in your macros. It's going to equate out to about what you need. If you're consuming the amount of protein you need every day, and it's a normal, not a super physiological level of amount of protein, if you're consuming your protein from natural sources, likely your fat is going to be taken care of and you don't need to stress about it. You want to go over the numbers for sure and check it and just make it sure it's all good once, but I've done this for many people and it all comes out to being roughly the same as long as they're consuming the protein from natural sources. Now, on that same note, nature doesn't create too many sources of fats mixed with sugars or carbohydrates. When I thought about this and looked at all the different kinds of foods that people commonly eat, I think milk, cow milk is roughly the only one I could find that had some naturally occurring sugars and fat into it. Other than that, though, it's very hard to find a source in nature of fat with sugars attached to it. So that should tell you something. When you're consuming your carbohydrates, when you earn them, right? That's the next one. When you're consuming your carbohydrates, try not to consume too much fat. Now, I don't want to get into this too sciencey, but there are a lot of good reasons why you don't want to be consuming fat along with your insulin spiking carbs. The fourth one would be to earn your carbs, right? So one thing I try to teach all my clients is that your body does specific things with macronutrients that it doesn't do with other macronutrients. It repairs muscles with protein. It doesn't do it with carbohydrates. So with that in mind, understanding what your body does with carbohydrates, you want to eat them when you earn them. If you're eating them and you haven't earned them, if you have no job for your body to do with the carbohydrates you're consuming, it's likely to be doing bad things you don't want them to be doing, just left unchecked in the body. So earn your carbs by training, staying active, the NEAT, the non-exothermic activity throughout your day. Keeping that high, you'll earn your carbohydrates. But if you're not doing too much, if you don't need them, you might want to scale the carbohydrates down and save them for when you do need them. The fifth heuristic is veggies, not water. Now, that's not to say to not drink water, but there's this common myth out there that when you're hungry, if you can drink a lot of water, it'll get rid of the hunger pains. That's been shown not to be true, and just by word of mouth, I know that it's not to be true. However, vegetables do work pretty well. Most people do have a vegetable that they do like more than others. For me, it's carrots. For others, it's cucumbers. For some, it's celery. So when you're getting those hunger pains, if you have nothing left at your disposal and you're trying to stay under your calorie limit or your macros, consume vegetables. Now, I don't want to get into a debate with people that say that you should count the calories or you should count the carbohydrates from vegetables. I'm going to say that you don't need to. We can get into the science of how they count calories in food and whether or not you're really consuming all those calories based on your gut flora, the bacteria, what's it like when they measure it in a laboratory versus what's in the actual package. So when you get down to it, splitting hairs doesn't really make a lot of sense. If you're using vegetables, if you're going to consume, a cup full of carrots versus going into the pantry and eating a lot of bread, I would say go ahead and eat the vegetables. It's going to save you from making those worse mistakes. So again, don't count the vegetables in your calories and macros as far as I'm concerned. Use them. Fill yourself up on those so that you're not eating outside of your plan, and don't sweat what it's doing to your daily macros. So I hope those 5 heuristics or shortcuts help you guys out during this lockdown, during this shutdown, making better choices throughout the day.